Kind of a tangent. My bad. Hello, and welcome to Madison Rants, the uprising of cliches. In the writing world, in the film industry, pretty much anywhere and everywhere you can find cliches. A cliche is a phrase or opinion that is often overused and betrays a lack of original thought. One of the cliche phrases that pops most easily into my mind is butterflies in the stomach. That's an overused phrase, often in romance, that apparently betrays a lack of original thought. This is a rant on not necessarily cliches, but the peril of not letting cliches exist, if that makes sense. While I totally agree that you shouldn't be just filling your novel or whatever the case may be, and I'm gonna use writing references just because that's mostly the medium that I use, so we'll just say in writing. You don't want to chock your novel full so that it's overflowing with cliches. I don't think we should do that. However, I also don't think that using a cliche every once in a while is the horrible pitfall that it's often made out to be. I understand why people push against the use of cliches because, like the definition implies, it does betray a lack of original thought, which essentially means you're just taking from someone else, you're too lazy to come up with something yourself, and by restricting use of cliches, it encourages more creativity and a creative use of language, and I totally agree with that. I think that that is a very good reason to restrict the use of cliches, especially in writing. By limiting what you can use, you end up coming up with some really creative solutions and really awesome phrases that are unique, one of a kind, and does not betray a lack of original thought. So I do agree that cliches should be kept at a minimal, but I also don't agree that cliches are the most horrible thing that you could possibly have in your novel. For me, I can handle a cliche or two in whatever novel I read, and that's not gonna bother me because cliches become overused for a reason. They do a really good job of conveying whatever message you're trying to send. I think cliches do a pretty good job of setting out what they were meant to do. For the reason a lot of people and publishers specifically don't want you to rely on cliches is one, you do want to have originality and creativity, and that'll prove kind of more of your technical creative skill, but also they are overused. And because they're so overused, that message that they've been trying to convey, and I think they do pretty well, sort of loses its potency because it's been used so much. I completely agree with all of that. Again, we fall into this peril with cliches where instead of avoiding cliche phrases like we're encouraged to do, what we end up doing, at least in my opinion, is creating cliche storylines. Maybe this is just where I look, when I read online specifically, but half of the stuff I read nowadays is pretty much the same plot line over and over and over and over again. I'm going to talk specifically about Wattpad because that's where a lot of my more expertise comes from, but a long time ago, and it still continues to this day, is I would say the cliche of the bad boy, good girl trope. That is everywhere. It was everywhere when I was young, and it's everywhere to this day. And I think that's the peril of saying you can't use cliche phrases at all is that you end up falling for cliche storylines. For me personally, I would rather see a novel that has some cliche phrases, but a totally original storyline. Totally original has to be in quotations because at this point in time, I think almost every single thing has been done, and at this point we're just sort of building on existing concepts and we're twisting tropes and cliches, so on and so forth. But again, while we've kind of totally eliminated these cliches and they've been gone for so long, to me they kind of almost seem new again. Like they're not overused anymore because we've pushed so hard this idea that you can't use butterflies in the stomach to indicate like the excitement of meeting someone and being attracted to someone. It seems new to me again because it's been shoved out of literature for so long. And yet, at every turn, there's some new alpha werewolf story, or bad boy meeting good girl, or even that twist on that cliche trope has kind of become a cliche itself, bad boy and good girl. For me, the peril of cliches is more about encouraging creativity in every space. Not just per line with each line you write, but per novel you write. I understand how difficult it is to come up with original storylines. Again, it's in quotes because I think at this point it's a little difficult to be totally original. Some idea is birthed out of the fact that this other idea exists. But the literary world just seems so saturated, and especially in, the YA genre, with the same sorts of characters, the same sorts of storylines, the same kind of drama, and I think the peril with being so obsessed with getting rid of the cliche phrases like butterflies in the stomach, we forget that storylines can be cliche as well. Like we've seen with restricting cliche phrases, we have encouraged a bunch of creativity with avoiding those cliches. We've seen so many more original phrases come out of it that say the same things as butterflies in the stomach without saying butterflies in the stomach. And it's been awesome to read those, but I think we should also apply that same sort of idea to storylines. Restrict it. Deny yourself the opportunity to write about the alpha werewolf and challenge yourself to write something different. Challenge yourself to not write about the bad boy. Challenge yourself to write about other things. One of the biggest problems with YA is they don't portray healthy relationships. Most of the relationships are very toxic, and they're built on this idea that it's romantic, especially with bad boys, is if he's only nice to you, like that's romantic. You're the only one he's good to. You're the only one he's nice to. And it's so funny because the older you get, the more you realize that if he's only nice to you but mean to everyone else, they're not a good person overall. YA, with a lot of these tropes and cliches, perpetuate this idea that these unhealthy relationships and these unhealthy behaviors are romantic and should be promoted. And I think that's very dangerous for younger kids, like younger teenagers, tweeners, to go into literature, who love to read and even watch shows, watch movies that perpetuate these concepts of being unhealthy. And I think, the alpha male, werewolf stories, and the bad boy, good girl, so on and so forth stories have a role to play in giving people sometimes a really twisted sense of what a relationship really is and what romantic relationships should look like. Once you're in your adult life, hopefully you start to realize that all those books that you loved when you were a kid, especially in terms of like YA romance, were way off the mark. That's not what relationships look like, and it's not what they should look like. That was kind of a tangent, my bad. To get back onto cliches, really the bottom line of this is I don't think it's bad to use a cliche phrase every once in a while. In fact, I think it's almost worse to have a cliche storyline overall. You can use not a single cliche phrase like butterflies in the stomach and yet have the most cliche story where everything's predictable, the characters are the same as every other character in every other book in this genre, but I would just rather see creative storylines than super creative lines. That said, as I've said before, I don't think that pushing that creativity and restricting and telling people like don't do this is bad. Again, this is just one of those, I want to see more variety, especially in YA, in terms of storylines. It's all kind of the same thing. And to me, that becomes a cliche. However, that said, and with everything that I just said, I'd also like to underline the fact that write whatever the hell you want. Don't take it from me to like, oh, Madison said that I can't write about a bad boy and a good girl, so I guess I can't do that. Honestly, when it comes down to it, you should be writing what you enjoy and what you love and what you want to have fun with. And the thing is, cliches, cliche storyline, cliche lines themselves are fun. I think that's the most important thing to take away from anything that I've said. In a more professional setting, yeah, I want to see more diversity in terms of going away from the usual tropes. But otherwise, have fun with writing. Talk about the soulmate AUs. Talk about the bad boys and the good girls. Write a book about alpha werewolves. Ultimately, writing is about you. It's about having fun. It's about loving your work and your craft. And yeah, cliches are heckin' fun. So go for it. What do I care? I'm just some silly little YouTuber who's talking into a camera pretending that my opinion matters. Before I close this video on the uprising of cliches, I want to talk about taking cliches and twisting them ever so slightly so that they're no longer cliche. Which I think is probably one of the best ways to be original, is to take something that's very cliche, that's a trope that's been done a million times over, and then twisting it ever so slightly. For example, the example that I've used throughout this entire video is the butterflies in the stomach. Instead of saying the stomach, you can say butterflies flapping in the esophagus. Or instead of butterflies, you can say hamster wheels spinning in the stomach. Take one part of the cliche, like in the example, changing stomach for esophagus or butterflies for hamster wheels, you've created something new. It's the same cliche that has the same message, but it's a little more creative. As other examples of twisting cliches, and more specifically twisting cliches for storylines, an example of that, I'll use the good girl, bad boy cliche, and at the risk of spoiling my own future idea, I'll share with you one of my ideas that I have. Editing Madison here, I thought that this part was a little too personal, so I'm just gonna say like an ex-con. Adding that just one extra element can kind of add complications to it. It can add another layer of depth. You can talk about ethnicity and its influence. You can talk about location's influence. There's so much you can do with that, and you can even look into mental health issues. So it's not just this bad boy who wears leather and smokes leaned against, the school like, I'm so bad, I don't listen to authority ever. It kind of adds this other layer of why Because there are so many reasons that people could turn into a bad person, and by adding just one other thing, you can really explore it and you can go further, and it's that slight twist on the bad boy trope. Another example, which again is coming from my own storyline, please don't steal these ideas, I work really hard on them, but just for the sake of example, something I'm doing is the very cliche trope of fake relationships, the older brother. And I'm kind of throwing it together and I'm smashing it all up and I'm turning it into something new, something fun. And it's taking, these cliches that have existed forever, using them as my springboard and just twisting them ever so slightly. Even though I gave this whole long rant about how cliches aren't, the worst thing when it comes to phrasing, like butterflies in the stomach, because they haven't been used for so long that at this point I feel like they can't be overused until we start overusing them again, and then it's just kind of like this never-ending cycle. But you can use cliches and tropes and whatever else as that springboard, and you can twist it just in one little way, and then it'll be original and creative and fun and something new. Again, at the end of the day, after this whole rant is said and done about cliches and how cliche storylines are getting so boring to me and blah blah blah, at the end of the day, what you write is your choice. Have fun with it, explore, write what has been done a million times over in terms of plot and storyline and tropes and cliches and whatever else. Have fun with it. And this is something important to remember. Your voice hasn't done it yet. That trope may have been told before, but you haven't told it before. And I think that's the most important thing to remember. That and have fun. Have fun, love what you do. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye! This was all over the place. This is what I do when I have no outline. I'm just off the cuff. This isn't gonna be the best video, but not all of them can be winners, so who cares? One of the cliches that I gotta get my thoughts together because I don't have any outline. I'm just doing this off the cuff. I'm trying to seem professional for whatever reason. I have this very professional air going on. I don't know what that's all about, but okay. Gimme. It's not really what I want to say. I don't remember the point that I was making. How does the phrase go? That was horrible.